Greetings and salutations. It is I, the Nomad, coming to you live from the wastelands of the internet once again to bring you the news and to basically have a chat with you, Mr. Barkley. I'll be honest with you when it comes to music. I'm about as talented, all right, as a pet rock. And in fact, my singing voice makes alley cats wince. Okay? Just so you understand where I am when it comes to music. I enjoy listening to music. I'm not going to say that. And I have opinions about what I like and what I don't like. All right? That's just the way it is with me. That doesn't mean I'm very good at it. Good morning, Oz. How are you doing? She just likes torturing me, Oz. Oh, it is one of those days. Hey TM, how's it going? So it's it's when it comes to music, like I said, there's music I like, music I don't like. Um, at overall, there are genres I like. All right, that's not to say that a genre that I don't like doesn't have good songs. Some of them are okay, but I have never been much of a fan for those who follow quote unquote trends. Um, and there are a number of artists, whether it's rock and roll, country, rap, etc. All right, that people will over, and I just look at that and go, eh, at best, or I get very derogatory at worst. Then there's other people who they get derogatory toward some of them, and I kind of go, well, I don't see it that way. And then that's just the way it is, right? It's the way I deal with music. So, and I know that for the people who are really into sound and that kind of stuff, and I'm not saying I don't appreciate it, but I just don't have the ear or the appreciation that most people do. But we got news. We got quite a few little stories today for a variety of different things. But let's get started, shall we? We begin once again. Russia gains control of Kursk from the Ukraine, Putin says. Russian President Vladimir Putin, all right, has said that his troops have regained control of the Kursk the border region overtaken in a surprise incursion by Ukraine last year, a claim which Kiev has denied. The Kiev regime's adventure has completely failed, Putin said in a video footage released by the Kremlin on Saturday. The full defeat of the enemy in the Kursk border region creates conditions for further successful actions by our forces in other important parts of the front. The Ukraine has pushed back on the claims, calling them propaganda and wishful thinking. The statements of the representatives of the high command of the aggressor country about the alleged end of hostilities in the territory of the Kursk region of the Russian Federation do not correspond to reality, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Ukraine said in a Telegram post on Saturday. Uh, so the let's talk about this for just a minute, shall we? Here's the map from Live UMap, uh, U.S. Little thing here. You can see the various different maps of where the fighting is really intense. All right, which remains along this region here. Okay, although there is what looks like a considerable push up through here. Um, and I think the next major goal is either here of the Russians, here, all right, which is where it looks like they're pushing out on the wings here in an effort to surround this area. All right, and then obviously increased pressure here. When it comes to the Crimea, there's more bombing taking place along this area, but unless there's a huge push to go across this river here, which is the Dnieper River, and I just don't see it. I just don't see it happening in Kherson anytime soon. I think the Russians are more or less satisfied with where this border basically is. Now, you see areas like here, um, and you're like, okay, why isn't there anything here? This is why, because it's all marshland, right? Fighting in marsh, nobody wants to do. All right. Now, what does that cause? I think the Russians would love to have taken Zaporizhzhia. Okay. But taking Zaporizhzhia is not in the cards at this point. Right? It's too far away. And what's more is because of this swamp, you're going to have to basically come from a front just along this line, which is very limited. And if you concentrate your forces, okay, the enemy can have attacks. Now, what are you seeing through here with some announcements? There's been several announcements, not the least of which is this one. All right, where Trump has basically said the recent bombing of Ukrainian civilian areas makes me think that Putin should be dealt with differently, such as through sanctions. Okay, Trump, how are you going to get sanctions? The problem isn't U.S. sanctions on Russia. We already sanctioned the crap out of Russia. How are you going to convince the Europeans to sanction Russia? And yes, they are the problem. They're still buying Russian fuel. They're still buying Russian gas, all right, for their energy sector. And the biggest violator of that is one of the biggest two-faced bitches on the freaking planet, Germany. Meanwhile, if you take a look at this little note here, at a meeting with Witkoff, Putin says Russia is ready to negotiate with Ukraine without any preconditions, the Kremlin spokesman said. That tells me that they're willing to continue these attacks along here. Okay, you can see at one point they had taken this entire area for the Ukraine. This entire area was blue right through here. Okay. The Russians have basically flattened them back into this area here is what they're showing is still under occupation. But to be honest, how much of that is accurate, we'll never know. The fact that they continue to attack these areas with aerial strikes and so forth um, is concerning because I think it's just mainly done to create pressure to say, look, we're going to go after Sumi next. I don't expect that, to be honest. However, they just don't. They have the forces there because they were dealing with the Kursk area, right? But I just don't think they're going to go for that area. I think their big push, like I said, is right here. I think this is their target point. They want to continue pressure up here, but their big target point is along this line. Now, does that mean anything? No. What it means to me is that the Russians aren't serious about peace. And I'm serious about it. The Russians are not serious about peace. So the question is, and the question has remained for a long time, how do you gain it? How do you get the Russians, if you're really seriously interested in peace in the region, you're going to have to pay a cost. Okay? You're going to have to pay a cost to convince the Russians, all right, to come to the table, the table. What's the cost going to be? If you're already taking things off the table, such as putting in troops, okay? If you're refusing to put in troops into the attack, then the cost is going to be massive, and I mean massive military support. Massive logistical U.S. support. That is what it's going to take. Now, does it have to be the U.S.? Theoretically, no. In reality, yeah. That's the way it is. Okay. How many people saw this little gem? Radicalized son of a CIA director was killed fighting for Russia in the Ukraine. A radicalized son of a CIA director was killed last year while allegedly fighting for Russia in the Ukraine, according to a new investigation. Michael Alexander Gloss, a 21-year-old son of the CIA's Deputy Director for Digital Innovation, Julian Galina Gloss, and a Navy veteran father, was killed on the front lines after enlisting in the Russian army, according to a lengthy investigation by independent Russian outlet Important Stories. His death was confirmed by the Post Friday by his father, Larry Gloss, who said that his son suffered from a mental illness and had a fixation on water purification. Have you ever noticed about people who cry about trees or moss or whatever have said nothing about these wars? Well, apparently, don't you think explosions are carbon positive? Or we just apparently this guy thought that this was going to get him a fixation on water purification. One of the manifestations of his mental illness was grandiosity, Larry Gloss explained. He always cared about the environment. He always wanted to take care of those disadvantaged and less able. So we'll go with Russia. In Michael's thinking, I think that term is far-fetched at this point, which I now conclude largely as a function of some text exchange he had with comrades before his demise. He thought the best way of realizing his dreams of water purification would be as a citizen of Russia. And the quickest way to get there, the quickest way to a Russian citizenship, would be through serving in the military in an active war zone and murdering people you've never met before. Now, I'm sure that this guy, Larry Gloss, the father, is devastated and the mother is devastated. Okay, I don't want to mean to make light of you know of a parent that lost their son, regardless of the circumstances. Okay, but when you talk about the son himself, dude, your kid's fixation on the environment came from where? I would venture to say that it came from you and your mother and your belief, all right, in environmental, we're going to save the environment. You've done a very poor job of explaining the environment to your son, mental illness or not. There's some serious leaps of thought there. You're exactly right. Let's go to the other big war area right now. Israeli probe into the killing of 15 Palestinian medics in Gaza finds professional failures. An Israeli investigation into the killing of 15 Palestinian medics last month in Gaza by Israeli forces said Sunday it found a chain of professional failures and a deputy commander has been fired. Mistake. Okay, the shooting outraged many in the international community, with some calling the killings a war crime. Medical workers have special protection under international humanitarian law. Yeah, funny how international law only works one way, doesn't it? All right, I don't see you complaining about how dare Hamas, okay, do the things that get medical workers killed. Israel first claimed the medic's vehicle did not have emergency signals on when the troops opened fire, but later backtracked. Cell phone videos recovered from one medic contradicted Israel's initial account. Footage shows the ambulance had lights flashing and logos were visible as they pulled up to help another ambulance that earlier came under fire. So another ambulance pulled up, and then this ambulance pulled up to quote unquote help the ambulance. A military investigation found that the deputy battalion commander acted under the incorrect assumption that all the ambulances belonged to Hamas militants. Um, don't they? Who's in control of this region? Who do these people work for? Oh, no, man, don't you understand? They're not under Hamas. Oh, Hamas doesn't sit up there and run control of the hospitals? Hamas doesn't sit up there and control who gets fuel and who doesn't get fuel? It was the deputy commander operating under poor night visibility felt his troops were under threat when the ambulance sped toward their position and the medics rushed out to check the victims. The military said the flashing lights were less visible on night vision drones and goggles. The ambulance immediately became under a barrage of gunfire that went on for more than 5 minutes after a brief pause. Minutes later, soldiers opened fire at a UN car that stopped at the scene. What the hell was the UN car doing? Did you did you hear about the lady who pulled over with three men in raincoats in the back seat of her car when they actually explained emergency flashers. I'm going to be real blunt with you. 8 Red Crescent personnel, 6 civil defense workers, and a UN staffer were killed in the shooting before dawn on March 23rd by troops conducting operations in the Tel Al Sultan, a district in southern Gaza city of Rafah. Troops bulldozed over the bodies along with their mangled vehicles, burying them in a mass grave. UN and rescue workers were only able to reach the site a week later. Um, Look, the problem that I see with this is not what people think it is. The problem that I see with this is that Israel is actually trying to say, "Oh, the commander did a bad thing. We're going to fire him. We're going to." They should have just sat up there and told them. Said, "These people, they were running with flashers and everything." Yeah, they do that all the time. All right, but we also know that Hamas does that all the time. So what's the point? What's your point? Did he have any reason to believe that these were Hamas people? Yes, he did. At that point, in a war zone, deal with it. If you don't like that, if you are all upset about it in an international law community, well then, buttercup, puck up, and sit up there and demand that Hamas be tried as war criminals. And then come back and tell me. The problem that's going on with the Middle East right now is people are trying to fight it with one hand tied behind their back. They know who these people are. They know how bad they are. A massive explosion at an Iranian port linked to missile fuel shipment kills 4, injures over 500. Muscat, Oman by John Gambrell. A massive explosion and fire rocked a port Saturday in southern Iran, purportedly linked to a shipment of a chemical ingredient used to make missile propellant, killing 4 people and injuring more than 500 others. The blast at the Shahid Rayel port, right, happened as Iran and the United States met Saturday in Oman for the third round of negotiations over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. While no one in Iran outright suggested that the explosion came from an attack, even Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who was leading the talks on Wednesday, acknowledged that our security services are on high alert given past instances of attempted sabotage and assassination operations designed to provoke a legitimate response. Old school Rome would not have these problems. That's very true. For hours, authorities in Iran offered no clear explanation for what caused a blast at the port, which is just outside of the Bandar Abbas, though they did deny that the explosion had anything to do with the country's oil industry. However, the port took in a shipment of sodium perchlorate rocket fuel in March. A private security firm, Ambry said, the fuel is part of a shipment from China. All right, by two vessels. By 2 vessels to Iran, reported in January by the Financial Times. The fuel was going to be used to replenish Iran's missile stocks, which has been depleted by its direct attacks on Israel. All right, and given on over to, of course, the Houthis. Personally, we should have sank the Chinese ships and told China, don't send freaking any kind of weapons grade material that way. That's what we should have done. We should be asking China why they're constantly trying to destabilize the region. But everybody wants to tiptoe around the Great China Wall. Meanwhile, China, it gets serious. China warns countries against striking a trade deal with the U.S. at its expense. China on Wednesday accused Washington of abusing tariffs and warned countries against striking a broader economic deal with the United States at its expense, ratcheting up its rhetoric in a spiraling trade war between the world's two biggest economies. Beijing will firmly oppose any party striking a deal at China's expense and will take countermeasures in a resolute and reciprocal manner, said its commerce ministry. The ministry was responding to a Bloomberg report, citing sources familiar with the matter, that Trump's administration is preparing to pressure nations seeking tariff reductions or exemptions from the U.S. to curb trade with China, including imposing monetary sanctions. Yeah, I don't think that Bloomberg report is just another freaking bunch of it's another red herring to bash Trump. To be honest, President Donald Trump paused the sweeping tariffs he announced on dozens of countries on April 2nd, except those on China, singling out the world's second largest economy for the biggest levies. In a series of moves, Washington has raised tariffs on Chinese imports to 145%, prompting Beijing to slap retaliatory duties of 125% on U.S. goods last week. Oh, no. All right. Last week, China signaled that its own across the board rates would not rise further, which is true. What they also said, though, is we're no longer going to ship rare earth minerals to the United States. The United States has abused tariffs on all trading partners under the banner of so-called equivalence, while also forcing all parties to start so-called reciprocal tariff negotiations with them, the ministry spokesman said. China is determined and capable of safeguarding its own rights and interests and is willing to strengthen solidarity with all parties. Nobody is going to trade with China. Okay? The idea that China, okay, is got the upper hand on this is quite frankly laughable. And I'm not exaggerating. Okay, it's laughable. Now, why am I saying it's laughable? Because of what they've already tried to do. All right? And what do I mean by that? One of the things that they attempted to do in order to stave this off was to wreck the US dollar by selling their mass interest in treasuries. They weren't the only ones, but there were a couple that were trying to force Trump's hand by selling US treasuries, thinking that the big dip that resulted from that was somehow going to scare Trump into not continuing the tariffs. But it didn't work. And the problem is now, and the other reason that they were selling their treasuries, by the way, was to prop up their own economy. But it hasn't worked. So China started looking around. Well, where can we sell our stuff? Where can we sell all of our things? We'll get other countries to replace the United States for, purchasing our manufactured goods. But you got a problem, China. China. And that problem is who's going to buy your stuff. Because the only other place that you would have that would actually be worthwhile, right, would have been trying to attempt to sell your crap, all right, to the Europeans. And the Europeans have done what they always said. Oh, yes, we will agree. We have got to take on the big bad United States. And then as soon as China said, good, release your tariffs on us to let our goods come into your country, they're like, there's no freaking way. There's no. They have tariffs on America. Don't you realize that they've been doing the same thing you have? The Europeans have been doing the same thing that the Chinese have, tariffing American products while at the same time exporting their shit to America left and right. So why in the world would China, or excuse me, Europe, open its markets to China when it won't even open its markets to the United States? What do they gain from it? They don't gain anything. So the Europeans are not going to sit up there and make the deals that you keep talking about. It's freaking hilarious. It's frankly stupid. And what's more is it's not working. China's threat. U.S. seeks India trade deal on e-commerce, crops, and data stores. A U.S.-India trade agreement under discussion will cover 19 categories, including greater market access for farm goods, e-commerce, data storage, and critical minerals. People familiar with the matter said the first step toward the deal that may help the South Asian nation evade even higher tariffs on its goods. The terms for reference for a bilateral deal, which was finalized by both sides this week, all right, include trade in goods as well as services, people said, asking not to be identified as discussions are private. In other words, India just gave a big F you to China. Japan is already in discussions with the United States about what they can do. Why? Because China is the problem in the region. Nobody wants these assholes. And yes, China is looking at global dominance, all right, although they are looking at it from the standpoint of we will slowly take over like the Borg. We will slowly ooze into these other areas. But as they ooze into their other areas, they bring with them their hate-filled practices. And as people watch what they do, they get further and further disgusted with what China is doing, which is why the resistance to Chinese actions increases dramatically, especially with what they're doing with the theft of intellectual property. And there's a realization you can't make a deal with China because they're not trustworthy. That's the reality. And as an example of that, you end up with this. Terror attack on tourists in India controlled Kashmir leaves at least 26 dead, officials say. At least 26 people were killed and many others injured Tuesday, the vast majority of them tourists, when suspected militants, Islamofascists, all right, opened fire on civilians in China's controlled Kashmir, according to Indian authorities in the region. Tens of thousands of Indian security forces spread out across Kashmir a day after the attack as police, army, and paramilitary forces continued their manhunt for the perpetrators who are now safely hidden away by the Pakistanis, I'm sure. Many businesses were closed Wednesday to protest the brutal attack on civilians, heeding a call from the Kashmir religious groups and political parties. The attack took place in South Kashmir's Paham Pahanglong, I'm not trying to butcher it, I can't say that region, a scenic destination dotted with meadows, glaciers that attracted hundreds of thousands of Indian and foreign tourists every year. The tourist traffic has increased over the last year as militant violence in the wider Kashmir region, which is disputed between India and Pakistan, has waned. So, in other words, Pakistan, which continues to fund these militants, all right, continues to now say, now Kashmir, we can start going back up. Our report say that two to three militants appeared and opened indiscriminate fire at the tourists. The Indian Express newspaper quoted a senior police officer saying, without naming him, The death toll is still being ascertained, so I don't want to get into those details. They will be officially conveyed as the situation becomes clearer. Needless to say that this attack is much larger than anything we've seen directed at civilians in recent years, said Omar Abdullah, the chief minister of Jammu and Kashmir, wrote in a social media post. Abdullah called the attack shocking beyond belief and said no words of condemnation could be sufficient to chastise those behind the shooting. So, in other words, we cannot sit up there and actually condemn anything. U.S. President Donald Trump pledged support for India after the deadly attack. Deeply disturbing news out of Kashmir, Mr. Trump wrote. Don't you love instead of saying President Trump wrote on social media? Who wrote this stupid freaking story? Oh, CBS News. Arshad Zargar. Go fuck yourself, dude. Pardon my language. All right. The United States stands strong with India against terrorism. The attack came as U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, along with his wife Usha and their children, paid a largely personal visit to India. Vance met earlier this week with India's leader, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. If I butchered your name, I apologize, sir. It wasn't intentional. Usha Vance is a practicing Hindu whose parents are from India. Basically, what you had was Pakistan make this attack so that they could try to embarrass the Trump administration. And they're not the only ones. They are hardly the only ones because you see hit pieces like this. Trump's MAGA faithful want to get even. They have nothing left to lose. McDowell County, West Virginia can be a brutal place. In February, massive floods killed 3 people, including a 2-year-old boy who was found 10 miles downriver from a truck he was traveling with his grandparents and sisters. The remains of a bridge are still violently twisted across the river by the road into Welch, the county seat. Some places became so inaccessible that in the richest country in the world, emergency services had to use pack mules to deliver supplies. Sandy and Tony Blankenship's kitchen table is stacked high with paperwork for families. Sandy is helping to get flood recovery money to repair their wrecked homes. Sandy, 53, grew up as a coal miner's daughter in McDowell before becoming a nurse, mother, foster mother, and Christian missionary and Donald Trump voter. The 47th president's surprisingly comfortable victory in last year's election came in part from his ability to reach people like her. You went to West Virginia, a deeply red state, to try to talk to somebody. Okay? And then go, well, this person's been a Democrat, and therefore I was doing this. No, you went to a deeply red state. You want to see how deeply red this state is? That's the county. That's the state of Virginia. He didn't lose a county. Okay? He didn't lose a county in the state of Virginia. All right? It has nothing, and their support for Trump has nothing to do, okay, with wanting to punish his political enemies. Don't get me wrong, there are people that need to be punished. But the MAGA people are looking at this saying, no, he cares more about America, which the Democrats continue to spit on. Time and time and time again. And people have gotten tired of it. It's not about wanting revenge. It's about I want people in charge that love the country. And I know a lot of leftists don't want to hear that, but that means something to a lot of people because they do. Unlike you leftists who despise the country and always look for ways to tear it down at every opportunity, mind you. That's what you're doing. It's just like this. I love this story from the AP. 3 Hegseth aides ousted in leak investigation decry the baseless attacks. 3 former senior advisors to the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth decried Saturday what they called baseless attacks after each was escorted from the Pentagon in an expanding probe on information leaks. Dan Caldwell, a Hegseth aide, Colin Carroll, a chief of staff to the Deputy Defense Secretary Stephen Feinberg, and Darren Selnick, Hegseth's deputy chief of staff, were among 4 officials in Hegseth's inner circle who were ousted this past week. While the 3 initially had been placed on leave pending the investigation, a joint statement shared by Cadwell on X said, or Twitter, said the 3 were incredibly disappointed by the manner in which our services at the Defense Department ended. Really? Sounds like Hegseth is going in there and getting rid of scum. Notice how none of them sit up there and talk about being staunch Trump supporters. None of them. These were all career leftist bureaucrats, and he got rid of them. And I have no problem because you're going to have to go in there and just start axing people left and right. Now, you can't axe, believe it or not, the ones that he can't axe, right, are the actual military advisors. But these DA civilians have been a problem again and again and again. In the announcement by Hegseth's chief of staff, Joe Casper, the office warned that the Defense Department personnel could face polygraphs in the probe. And you don't want to work for us anymore, and you refuse to take a polygraph? Bye! You're not owed anything. The Defense Department needs a cleansing just like the other bureaucracies running through the government. And this is just the start. Because there's too many anti-American pieces of shit involved in this stuff. And I've met them. And I'm not exaggerating. It infuriated me while I was in the Army, all right, to have to work with a DA civilian, a Defense Department, a DOD civilian, not DA, DOD, a DOD civilian who had proudly ran to Canada to avoid the draft or to be no more. I don't need an anti-American piece of shit like that serving in the Defense Department. How the hell did he even get his friggin' job? The rest of us that ended up talking to the guy were like, we're just flabbergasted because the guy was a piece of shit. This is an anti-American piece of shit as far as I was concerned while I was in, all right? And you have no business getting a job with the federal government, all right, with the Defense Department and the federal government, the DOD. If you wanted to work for the post office, fine. But that bastard had no business being hired, and whoever hired him, however he was able to get the job, they should be gone too. All the people who were part of the process that got that guy a job should be gone. I wonder how many of these bureaucrats were simply rubber stamp things that they were supposed to actually review. There is so much BS and bureaucratic red tape that I would have been sure the vast majority, to be honest. I would say at least 70, 80% of them. U.S. lawmakers urge Trump to tackle North Korea's abductions of the Japanese. This is from Kyoto News. A bipartisan group of U.S. legislators has sent a letter to President Donald Trump urging him to prioritize the prompt return of Japanese nationals abducted by North Korea decades ago, the office of one of the lawmakers said on Friday. As you craft and implement your administration's North Korea policy, we believe that you have a unique opportunity to once again bring the plight of these Japanese abductees to the global attention and make meaningful progress in delivering justice for them and their families. The letter signed by 17 members of Congress. Well, here's a question. Here's the question. Why didn't these 17 members of Congress, and I would venture to say that most of them had been there under the Biden administration, all right, why didn't they send it to Biden? In the letter dated April 4th was disclosed to Kyoto News by the offices of Hawaiian Representative Jill Tokuda, all right, who played a key role in submitting the request to Trump, the first sitting president to hold talks with the North Korean leader when he met with Kim Jong Un in Singapore in 2018. And you've sat on this since 2018, which is 7 years ago, through the entire Biden administration and said nothing. Huh? They're forcing the Japanese to build them Gundams. Uh, Here's another hit piece. Today is heavily Donald Trump Day, by the way. Trump gets called out in front of millions at the Pope's funeral. Donald Trump may have. Now, this is from the Daily Beast. This is from Tom Sykes at the Daily Beast. This is hilarious. All right. The posthumous criticism came after Donald Trump was mobbed by a group of world leaders, including France's Emmanuel Macron, all right, and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of Pope Francis's funeral. The pressure from the European leaders appeared to pay off as Trump sat down briefly with Zelensky before the funeral, and then the White House said he would meet again with him afterwards. However, it was Trump's signature term policy of building a border wall that appeared to draw papal ire in the funeral eulogy. The policy was much criticized by Francis in his lifetime, and Cardinal Giovanni Bastia Re, who delivered the homily, made sure that the late Pope's hostility to the policy was not forgotten. Pope Francis insistently raised his voice, imploring peace and calling for reason and honest negotiations to find possible solutions. Then build bridges, not walls, was an exhortation he repeated many times. Ooh, can you feel the burn? Can you feel the burn that Trump must have felt? Trump. Oh, we got the orange Hitler this time. A man we've hated forever because of his anti-abortion stance, Mr. Tom Sykes. Oh, no, he was a great man because he called up the orange Hitler. Pope Francis was not a good pope. Um, I have not made it a secret that I was a not a fan of Pope Francis. Okay, and the reason I'm not a fan of Pope Francis, all right, has to do with his worldview, not his religious views per se, his worldview. He's a Marxist. He was a Marxist, right? He may not claim that he is, but he was a Marxist. He believed in the Marxist ideology. He came from Argentina. The problem with the poor in Argentina and the problem with the poor in America isn't the same. And I don't think that the pontiff or anybody really understands that. The poor in Latin America versus the poor in the United States versus the poor in Europe, they're not the same. Poor people are people who are poor. Yeah, okay, they all have certain things in common, but not everything. And that lack of understanding by the pontiff was something that I vehemently disagreed with. I don't believe the Pope. I don't believe in the Pope thing, so you don't. I don't pay much attention to them. All right, that's an American point of view, Mr. Barkley. It's not uniquely American, but it's an American viewpoint because it's individualistic based and it ignores the broader context of the papal power throughout the world. And what I mean by that is whether you agree with the Pope or follow the Catholic Church is immaterial in America, but outside America, it holds great sway. Wasn't he supposed to be the last Pope before the end of the world? I'm not going to get into that, but there is a the Fatima prophecies, okay, which I I think I did hear. I don't know the rumors. I don't know. I was not the the person who received the Fatima prophecies. All right, and the church has the Catholic Church has not been completely open of what was said in them. They have referenced things here and there, and you've heard rumors. But I'll be honest with you, we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. But it is the Fatima prophecies are one of the things I did say that that Francis was going to be the last pope. Okay. All right. Enough of this. Let's go to this story. Wannabe G.I. Jane sues the Navy after her dream of becoming the first female Navy SEAL comes to a crashing end over her age. Yeah, a wannabe G.I. Jane dreamt of becoming the first female Navy SEAL ended because the military recruiters delayed her application so long that she aged out, she claimed in a lawsuit. Yeah, you were really wanting to be a Navy SEAL, lady. All right, just putting it out there. Navy officials failed to advance Amanda S. Reynolds' application, then told her in the fall that she would no longer qualify for Naval Officer Training Command in Newport, Rhode Island, because she is over the age limit of 42 by the time she graduated, according to court papers. The opportunity was kind of taken away from me. I would like to have that be reinstated, said Reynolds 41 told the Post. I would just like the outcome to be determined by the merits instead of some sort of technicality. Lady, I'm going to point this out to you, lady. First of all, you saying that you want to be a Navy SEAL, all right? At age 41? Really? You weren't going to survive that. You weren't going to survive the training. You would be lucky if you decide if you survived the officer training. And of course, what is she? She's a lawyer. Where from? Long Island. She first tried to join the Navy in 2018. Again, 7 years ago. When you were how old? You're 41 now? You were 34? You said, wait a minute, let me try to join the Navy when I'm 34? I think it's BS that I'm not a SEAL. It's just a technicality that I'm not enlisted. I was in decent shape when I was a Marine and in my early 20s. Could not make the cut. My running was not good enough at age 20, ma'am. I'm just pointing out to you that this Dingleberry, and she looks, in the clothes she's wearing, she looks healthy. But at 34, it's unlikely that you would have frickin' survived the training. And that's it. They immediately sent you to be a Navy SEAL. You gotta ask yourself a question. Where do they come up with these people? Seriously. I'm gonna sue. You took away my opportunity. The fact that she's even able to launch this lawsuit is a problem. The fact that she's even able to launch this where a court doesn't say just that is too nonsensical and throws it immediately out, that's a problem. Now, finally, you're starting to see some things happen. It's always been a dream of mine to die while training and to be a Navy SEAL at age 42. Let's get on to another wonderful story. Federal authorities arrest two judges in escalation of Trump's immigration crackdown. Federal authorities have arrested a Wisconsin judge and a former New Mexico judge in two separate cases, accusing them of interfering with Trump's administration immigration enforcement efforts. The Milwaukee Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan was arrested on Friday morning and charged with obstruction. She is accused of helping an undocumented immigrant evade arrest by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement after he appeared in her court on April 18th. Dugan's arrest came one day after federal authorities arrested a former New Mexico judge, Joe Cano, and his wife on charges related to the Cano's reported harboring of an undocumented immigrant, illegal alien, all right, with ties to Trende Aragua. Araga. I'm not trying to butcher it. I can't pronounce things. I'm horrible at pronunciations. The actions against the judge mark a sharp escalation in the Trump administration's aggressive efforts to remove undocumented immigrants from the United States. No, it is something that has needed to happen for a long time, folks. The the reality is, okay, the reality is that the judicial branch of the service is fractured and broken. And people who were in charge of preventing it to get that way are more interested in their own personal ambitions. And yes, I'm talking about you, Mr. Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts. You don't give a shit about the law, and you don't give a shit about the judiciary. You only care about your place in the world's and how the world looks at it. Not in actual justice or judicial rulings. And so what you had here with a judge, good old Dana, all right, or Ms. Dugan, whatever her damn name was, who decided to have an immigration hearing, realized that ICE was coming for him, and then hid him and let him go out a back door rather than where most of the people go through the front door and get arrested by ICE in an attempt to have him avoid arrest. And yes, this woman should have been arrested. Yes, she should be charged. She's not the only one. Neither is this Cano character. That I have a feeling we're going to find out more information on that. That it's not just that this. I think the Cano guy was just a bad judge completely, right? It wasn't about immigration with him. It was about this guy is on the take for a lot of things, is what I think it is. Hey, TC. Welcome. But they arrested this woman. They're charging her now, and there's a lot of them, especially in California, that need to be arrested as well. These people have standing deportation orders. Oh, due process hasn't been followed. I got to understand that this is, we gotta have due process. No, we don't. Because due process used to be, we catch you, we deport you, and you never saw a judge. Now these people are seeing not just a judge, they're seeing judge after judge after judge in an attempt to delay things, and that's where the judiciary branch is today. And it needs to be reined in. Don't have a cow, man. Oh my god. In a in the course of a child porn probe targeting his younger brother, an upstate New York man was uh, caught a legal ricochet shot when the investigators discovered videos showing him engaged in sexual acts with animals, including a cow. Court records show. Boo. Mark Banks, 38, was arrested earlier this month for sexual misconduct for allegedly having sexual intercourse with a dairy cow on the property of Windsor Acres in Broome County Farms, where he worked for 22 years. Don't milk it. A New York State Police investigation originally focused on Banks' brother, Christopher, 37, for possessing child porn transmitted online. When the police executed a search warrant at Christopher's residence, he apparently shares with his sibling. They scooped up an assortment of electronic equipment. A review of seized materials resulted in a filing of a felony charge against Christopher for possessing a sexual performance by child, a school cafeteria employee. Christopher was immediately fired from the local school district. Well, okay. In a handwritten statement given to police out of my own free will, Mark wrote, the state police found some videos on my device today involving sex with animals, adding that when I was younger, I had sex with a cow. Okay, so you're already degenerate enough to have sex with a farm animal. But that wasn't enough for you. That wasn't enough. At some point, someone said, get the camera. Really? Really? Get the camera? It's probably a lot more common than any of us could imagine. I doubt that. Okay? I seriously doubt that. I grew up in a rural county, in a rural, on a farm. I guarantee you that the incidence of such things, while they happen, is not a common event. I think just the degeneracy is getting out of place in this world. I'm not a criminal, said the Mexican politician. Suspected of being in bed with cartels. Sure. Culiacan, I think it's Culiacan. Hopefully that's how you pronounce it. All right, Mexico. Since President Trump took office, the White House has accused Mexico of maintaining an intolerable alliance with drug cartels. Not wrong. That has drawn the attention to the Sinaloa state governor, Ruben Roca, and his alleged ties to the local drug bosses. Roca, a silver haired former academic, leads a state that is so deeply linked to narcotics that the cartel of the same name is a top local employer. A turf war between cartel factions is rocking Sinaloa, and many there say one reason that Roca can't stop it is because of alleged ties with the cartel chiefs. After a gunman killed two boys and their father earlier this year, thousands of protesters marched on the governor's palace and smashed the glass door to Roca's office. A plane dropped flyers in the state capital of Culiacan in September, referring to Roca as a narco governor, assassin, and corrupt who was delivered to our state, who had delivered our state to criminals. I am not a crook. Organized crime and government are the same thing, said Maria Isabel Cruz, leader of Warrior Bloodhounds, which looks for missing victims of Mexico's drug violence. Roca has said that he has no link to the cartel and has never met a cartel boss. I am not a criminal, Roca told reporters in October. He declined to comment for this article. Trouble in Sinaloa has put Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum, in a bind. Trump has imposed tariffs on some of Mexican goods on the grounds that the government isn't doing enough to stop fentanyl trafficking. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has threatened unilateral military action in Mexico against cartels if the government doesn't step up. Beinbaum. No, Scheinbaum. The problem that they all have is she's as compromised, I guess is the best way to put it, as this guy that they're all complaining about. Roca, 75, was born in Sinaloa and began his career as a math teacher. This Does this sound familiar to anybody? I'm just asking some questions here. Just sound familiar. Eventually becoming a rector of the Sinaloa Autonomous University. He has written 13 books, including a novel about the drug business overtaking Sinaloa. In the 2021 governor race, which Roca won in a landslide, a reporter asked him whether it was necessary to coordinate with organized crime to run the state, such as Sinaloa. You have to find a way to do it, said Roca. The campaign featured violent interference by Chapitos, a, a cartel faction, according to opponents and analysts. Maria Zamora, an opposition candidate, said government briefly kidnapped dozens of opposition electoral workers, forced some candidates to withdraw, and intimidated voters. That's not a surprise. Uh, on to old Canada. The view from here. Welcome to Toronto, the West's newest sanctuary city for Americans. In the sixth and final season of A Handmaid's Tale, all right, refugees from Gilead, America's post-democratic theocracy, find safe haven in Little America, a fictional neighborhood in Toronto. In the real world, Toronto is becoming a popular sanctuary, just as during the Vietnam War, when many American families, including that of the urbanist Jane Jacobs, flocked north. Today, the continent's fourth largest city is welcoming disaffected U.S. academics and scientists. Leave. You want to fly there? You want to flee to these areas? Go there. Leave. You anti American pieces of shit. Leave. If Canada is a safe haven for you and you're going to sit up there and live in the land of no human rights, leave. Don't believe me? Say something negative about Canada while you're there. See what happens. I think we should ban Canada as a whole. Meanwhile, the fleeing continues, according to The Guardian. American refugees fleeing across state lines for safety. America is on the move. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are packing up boxes, loading U-Hauls, and shipping out of state in an urgent flight towards safety. They are being propelled by hostile political forces bearing down on them because of who they are, what they believe, or for their medical needs. All are displaced within the country for reasons they did not choose. They are the new generation of American internal refugees, and their ranks are growing every day. Really? Here we profile families that have joined America's swelling class of internal refugees. They represent just 5 stories. All right, many others which have included librarians fleeing book bans. Okay? Professors forced out of ideologically motivated college education boards, and most recently, thousands of federal employees fired by the Trump administration. Yes. John Dubey takes great pride in his decades of long public service. He has been a high school history teacher for 35 years. I encourage inquiry and evidence-based approach, he said. All right. It's a mantra of mine. If you have an understanding of the past, you can understand a lot about the present. Really. My guess is you are a follower of Howard Zinn. It's the sensibility he infused in his classroom at Timberlane Regional High School in Plastow, New Hampshire, where he taught for more than 30 years. The town is also where he brought up his two children, living what he described as a normal, some would say suburban life. I stopped being normal around 4 years ago when the headwinds started to build over what right wing groups claimed was the victimization of white kids through the teaching of critical race theory. And it's exactly what it is. What you were was a leftist who wanted to go, oh, look at me, I'm one of the good ones. I'm a white person who understands the plight of the Native Americans and of the blacks in the country, and I wanted critical thinking going on and everything. But you're teaching CRT, which is a one-sided view of history. If that's what you're teaching, you should have been gone. Blame Whitey, blame Whitey, blame Whitey, leftist Marxist ideology. And in New Hampshire, you were fleeing from New Hampshire, a blue state. And where did you flee? Vermont. Uh huh. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, scientists considering brightening clouds to reflect sunshine among many ways to prevent runaway climate change. Experiments to dim the sun will be approved within weeks. Experiments to dim sunlight to fight global warming will be given the green light by the government within weeks. Outdoor field trials, which could include injecting aerosols into the atmosphere or brightening clouds to reflect sunshine, are being considered by scientists as a way to prevent runaway climate change. ARIA, the government's Advanced Research and Invention Funding Agency, has set aside £50 million for projects which will be announced in the upcoming weeks. Professor Mark Symes, the program director for ARIA, Advanced Research and Invention Agency, said there would be small controlled outdoor experiments on particular approaches. We are we will be announcing who will be given funding in a few weeks. God, hey, hey, Sixer. Uh, yeah, okay. You're gonna reflect sunlight. What's that gonna do, folks? Just curious to the plant life. You know, the great carbon absorbers of the world. You can't make this up. We're going to reflect sunlight. We're going to block sunlight and see what happens. We'll burn Jews just like Hitler did, said BBC contributor in Gaza. A journalist who has appeared prominently on a BBC's Arabic channel to report from Gaza called for Jews to be burned as Hitler did it. Oh, right. It can be revealed. Samir Elzanen, I'm not trying to butcher your name, sir, all right, has appeared on BBC's Arabic more than a dozen times since the conflict erupted following the October 7th Hamas attacks on southern Israel. He reported live last month, and his dispatches have included reports from the Nazareth refugee camp in June last year after an Israeli military operation to rescue 4 hostages held by Hamas led to hundreds of Palestinian deaths. It has now emerged that Elizenin, 33, has issued a stream of social media posts which single out Jews for condemnation and even appear to call for violence against them. I mean, appears? When things go awry for us, shoot the Jews. It fixes everything, he said in a Facebook post in 2022. Welcome to the current state of journalism. You know. All right. Now we'll start to get into the more of the more stories. All right, about animals. Australian snipers have shot down 750 koalas from helicopters. Believe it or not, it was for their animals' own good. Ah. A recent brush fire has prompted authorities to cull some of the affected wildlife. An Australian government claims it has no alternative, but activists are calling this indiscriminate slaughter. Koalas are among Australia's most recognizable and beloved symbols, particularly in New South Wales, Queensland, and the Australian Capital Territory. They are considered an endangered species. Despite this group's status, a group of snipers has been killing hundreds of koalas from helicopters in Bunj Bim National Park, a vast natural reserve located in southern Australia. The Australian government said it is said to be backing this operation, reportedly as a humane action. So the koalas being blasted from helicopters. Drop bears to dropped bears. These concepts seem unrelated to at first glance. However, they become the focal points of controversy that has erupted in the Australian state of Victoria, where the Bund Bim National Park is situated. Local media recently reported that hundreds of koalas are being euthanized in the area. The news wasn't only surprising, but also heartbreaking, especially when it was revealed how the killings are carried out. Snipers shot koalas from helicopters, according to ABC, Australian Department of Energy. All right, and climate. Australia's Department of Energy, Environment, and Climate. All right, the DECA purported approval of these aerial shootings. An estimated 600 to 700 koalas have been euthanized in Victoria's Bim National Park, Budbim National Park, and that the numbers are expected to climb. How many koalas have been killed? The exact figures vary depending upon the source, but the campaign seems to have killed at least hundreds of koalas, totaling more than 500. Earlier in April, Yahoo News reported that between 600 and 700 marsupials had been killed. Activists claim that the number may exceed 700, while other media outlets estimate the number to be about 750, which would exceed 700. Why? According to local authorities, the culling is justified on humanitarian grounds. The culls are part of a euthanasia program prompted by a bushfire in March that devastated around 5,400 acres of the Budjin National Park, the freaking national park. All right, the fire is said to have affected local wildlife, including koalas, destroying 20% of the nature reserve. Many animals were injured and abandoned, while there were also a significant loss of eucalyptus trees, which serve as their food source. Just pointing this out. They're whacking koalas, all right, because the number of eucalyptus trees has been affected. And by the way, for those who don't know, eucalyptus trees are fires waiting to happen. Okay? Put another one on the Barbie? Is that what you're trying to say? Barbecue time. Meanwhile, in the United States, I'm not sure how I missed this story. A United Airlines flight sees engine fire after takeoff due to an apparent rabbit strike. These bunnies are dangerous in a protest of the upcoming Easter, apparently. A United Airlines flight experienced an engine fire shortly after takeoff that was apparently caused by rare rabbit strikes, which scares me because it means there's more than one. It's a coordinated effort. Live ATC audio documents the flight crew asking that the plane be inspected for an engine fire and being told that it was a rabbit that apparently got sucked into the engine. Rabbit through number 2. That'll do it, the pilot responded. Oh my god. The Boeing 737-800 was carrying 153 passengers and 6 crew members. There was a loud bang and a significant vibration in the plane. Passenger Scott Wolf told Good Morning America. The plane proceeded to climb. Every few moments, there was a backfire coming from the engine, a giant fireball behind it. Everyone in the plane started to panic. Little did they know it was the rabbits Bugs Bunny got a hold of the catalog. I didn't realize that rabbits were a problem. All right, trying to take out planes now. Our flight from Denver to Edmonton returned safely to the Denver airport, all right, to address the possible wildlife strike, the United said in a statement. The FAA said that the plane returned around 8:05 p.m. local time on Sunday after the crew reported striking an animal while departing. Passengers continued to Edmonton on a new aircraft. Ah, bunnies out of control. All right. People have been talking about bird strikes on planes. I've never heard of a rabbit jumping up into a plane engine before. Ah, and you thought that it was only Teslas. Woodpeckers are on the loose. Ferocious woodpecker damages 25 in a Massachusetts town. How many were Teslas? I'm just curious. A Massachusetts town is under siege from an apparently territorial pleated woodpecker being blamed for the damaging more than 225 vehicles in the area. Rockport resident Janelle Favaloro, I'm not trying to butcher your name, managed to capture a photo of the culprit caught in the act of targeting a vehicle with its jackhammer-like beak. We have a vandal in the neighborhood, Favaloro wrote on social media. He is described as 18 to 24 inches tall, wearing black and white and a red hat. So they're trying to blame the woodpecker for being MAGA now, apparently. She said she knows of at least 25 vehicles that have been targeted by the bird, usually the side view mirrors or windows. The woodpecker showed up, landed on the windshield wiper of the RV in our yard, and was looking at its reflection. And we were like, I'll bet that one damaged the mirrors as well. You were looking for bears and other things. Guess what? Thought it was just the local kids having a good time doing mischief and damage. Nope, it's the woodpeckers. He packs out swastikas. what is it with wildlife, right? He read the story about the moo cow being raped. Final story of the day, folks. Opossum pooches shred the waves at Florida's dog surfing festival. Only in Florida. Now, we do a ton of Florida man stories. This one, not so much. Canines conquered the waves in Florida for the Brevard Humane Society's 13th annual East Coast Dog Surfing Festival. An Easter tradition at Lori Wilson Park in Cocoa Beach saw 23 radical rovers riding surfboards and shredding the waves on Sunday. The competition was attended by dozens more canines and about 5,000 human spectators. Sammy the Chiweenie, all right, Sammy the Chiweenie, all right, a cross between a Chihuahua and a Dachshund, successfully defended his 2024 title by taking the top spot in this year's competition. Dogs really do want to surf, just like people, said Teresa Clifton. I don't think so. I don't see the Chihuahuas. I don't see the dogs paddling out to the surfboard, right, hopping on it and then trying to surf. I see humans going, oh, let's put the dog here and see what happens. Yes. The festival, sponsored by Ron John Surf Shop, also featured a canine bikini contest. And an Easter outfit contest. Um. Okay. At least, at least it's not a negative Florida man story. We need to have a bikini contest. I'm sure the dogs were looking forward to that too, right? But at least it was fun and people had a good time. So that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed the show, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Hope you all have a good day, and I'll talk at y'all later. Bye bye, everybody.